Ladies and gentlemen, please notice that exits are conveniently located at the front and rear of this auditorium. When leaving the theater, we suggest that the exit at the front of the auditorium will allow you easier access to the parking areas. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Butler.
And I'm Mike Field.
And welcome to Forgotten Cinema, now showing. Each episode, we highlight a brand new release. We'll discuss what we love about the movie or maybe don't love about it. But don't take our word for it. Go see the movie for yourself.
Yeah. And you might notice that we are not alone. It is not just the Mike and Mike show today. We are joined by Steven Bernstein from cinematographer, podcaster, director, author. Steve, thank you so much. I said podcast, so let me pop the podcast. It is Filmmaker and Fans Podcast, a podcast for film lovers and creatives where fandom meets film school. It's a great pitch line. I like that. Steve, please introduce yourself. Let people know who know our show, know all about you, because we are actually really excited to talk about Wake Up Dead Men with you. So please, the floor is yours.
Look, I've been doing this for a long time, which is making movies. Nearly 100 feature films and TV shows in various capacities. Actually started and was trained as a writer at the BBC in the UK, and then music videos came around. And before I knew it, I was borrowing equipment from the BBC. I returned it, but borrowing it, and we were shooting some of the earliest, most significant music videos that were ever shot. Great training ground, because in those days there were no mistakes, just motifs. So we would experiment with what you're experimenting with, some interesting lighting. Wet downs, probably first used in music videos where you wet down surfaces, so kickback light, blue backlight. Party gels were rarely used then, those sorts of things. And then experimenting with reduction of the quality of the image. Handholding was around, but the idea of using Super 8 cameras, 16 millimeter cameras, emphasizing the grain, all those came from those experiments with this kind of new art form. That led to me doing a lot of commercials with some significant people, Tony Kaye among others, and some awards, the Cannes Golden Lion, the DAD Award, and lots of other things. That led to commercials with some of the biggest commercial directors in the world, particularly in the UK. And then that led to feature films, including Monster, which won the Oscar, of course. The early films of Noah Baumbach, Mr. Chelsea's Kicking Screaming, Like Water for Chocolate, which is the highest grossing foreign language film of all time, blah, blah. Wrote some textbooks in there. A book called Film Production for Focal Press, which is the biggest selling textbook about film production ever written, and used universities everywhere. That led to me to shoot lots of films, other films in America, particularly comedies. People are always surprised that the guy who shot Monster and Like Water for Chocolate and Noah Baumbach films also shot White Chicks and Half Baked and Little Man and Waterboy, but some of the highest grossing films of all time. So it gave me an upfront grandstand seat to see how other directors did it and see how the industry, and I loathe to use the term industry because I think it's an art form, but how the industry worked and so how directors succeeded and how sometimes they would fail as well. And then right after Monster, my friend Clark Peterson, who produced that film, said, Steven, like, you started as a writer, you still write a lot of screenplays, I wrote a lot of plays, did a lot of stuff for theater. Why don't you go back and do what you were originally trained to do, which is direct, and wrote a film called Decoding Annie Parker, which got a lot of interest from a lot of agents. So I got this incredible cast, Helen Hunt with her Oscar, Samantha Morton with her 2 Oscar nominations, Aaron Paul with his Emmys, Bradley Whitford with his Emmys, and so on and so forth. And we shot this film, which had some considerable success, made a lot of money, won a lot of awards. That led to my next film, Dominion, which I also wrote and directed with John Malkovich, dear friend and great actor, Rhys Ifans, Romola Gary, which got, again, great reviews, fortunately. And that led to my next film, which is GRQ, which comes out next year. GRQ is interesting because it was based on a novel of mine called GRQ. You see the connection there. And that was, I was never considered myself a novelist, but the novel took off. It's won 3 literary awards, won the Literary Titan Awards, won the American Writer Awards. And I'm forgetting the third one, which is they're going to be very angry. I'm very upset that there's another one. And then it's got this 85% perfect score on Amazon, and it's been selling really very, very well, which is all very exciting, which led to another book commission I got coming up. That new book coming out next year about creative practice with Routledge, biggest publisher in the world, asked me to write it for them. And then I've got a book called The Book of 10, which is like a handbook for filmmakers of 10 things about directing, 10 things about screenwriting, 10 things about cinematography, producing. Very simple little manual that comes out next week. The only thing significant about all that stuff, about my whole career, is not how remarkable I am, because I'm probably not that remarkable. I guess it's just that I've done so many different jobs by a series of accidents. So I was a cinematographer, a member of the American Society, elected member of the American Society of Cinematographers, Directors Guild of America, the Writers Guild. I've produced my films with my partner, Carolyn Rodney. I've directed a lot of movies, a lot of TV, and a lot of commercials. I've screenwritten now 26 scripts, a lot of which are in prep and pre-production, right, for a TV show. There's a lot of multi-hyphenates out in the world right now, which is unfortunate, because a lot of multi-hyphenates is not what you do, but what you aspire to. I've actually done these things, and I don't know if that makes me remarkable so much as gives me a unique perspective, in that having worked below the line as a cinematographer, I have a better understanding of how writing can work and how it doesn't work. Like, people often forget the visual elements and how it's essentially a visual medium, and then we'll only write in terms of exposition, explaining things to audiences, and sometimes just show them. By the same token, when you write, you realize that you don't have to express things all the time. That sometimes, again, you can do the opposite, just show something. Sometimes it's more emotive. You have a moment of silence. I find films are most effective when people aren't speaking, but we anticipate what they may be thinking, which is apropos of the things we'll be talking about today. And then also producing, you come to an understanding of what things cost, whereas a cinematographer, you are not so concerned about thinking what cost, but what the result's going to be. So you mix all these things together and you end up with a perspective on our particular art form. That's what's beautiful about this art form, is it combines so many different skill sets. And I guess that's the story of my career and my life.
I mean, the only thing left is for you to get in front of the camera. So when are you going to start? When are you going to start?
Done that, I'm afraid. Yeah, I am a fantastically bad actor. I was in a film called one of the great tragedies, a film called One Night with the King, which was an epic film we did in India. I was in India for a year. Huge battle sequences, elephants, camels. It was spectacular. I mean, not necessarily a great film, but it was epic proportion. And they wanted me to play the part of Esther from the Bible, her father. And I'm in right at the beginning of the film. The tragedy is that film starred Omar Sharif and Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole may be the greatest actor of the last 50 years. And the way it was edited together, you have Peter O'Toole, the world's greatest actor, and 5 seconds later, you have Steven Bernstein, not the world's greatest actor. So my conjecture, when people comment on the true terribleness of my performances, it's not as terrible as it seems. It's just a juxtaposition with the world's greatest actor.
Exactly.
I don't seem quite as good as Peter O'Toole. I did Peter that a
Well, the Bible is a great segue for our movie this week that we're talking about tonight. So we are talking Wake Up Dead Men. For those who have followed us on our lead up, we talked about Knives Out, we talked about Glass Onion. So this is our now showing. Mike and I watched this. Did you watch this again, Steve, over the weekend? Because I know you said
I did. I've seen it, and I was at the premiere in London with all the actors. So that was great fun. I got a chance to speak to them and so on. So got a good perspective on it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, great. So that's what we all watched this weekend, and we're going to talk about it. Butler, I always lead off with you because I always know you like to kind of dive right in. I when you texted me when you watched it, and you were like, I love the speech in the beginning that Blanc has given, that Daniel Craig has given about religion. I think that resonated with me as well. So why don't you hit us with what is specifically about that speech you liked, and maybe. Yeah, just start right there, Mike, and we could just kind of go off from there. Let's dive into religion, shall we?
Well, as you know on the show, which we try not to mention too often, but it has been mentioned, I am no fan, and neither is Benoit. So that was great for me. I love his speech about being basically hooey and smoke and mirrors and all the issues with the church and what they cover up and what they represent and how it's just they're the exact opposite of what they say they are, which is obviously Josh O'Connor's character totally is buys all that and is kind of the good person that I think the church aspires to be. But I love Benoit's speech. I think we get a great glimpse into his his true beliefs. I think this is the first time we really kind of get to know Benoit, which I really like. And I am just happy to say, after that speech and from then on the movie, this is Knives Out is no longer the only Rian Johnson film I enjoy. So that is, I think I should throw that out there, that despite me absolutely hating Glass Onion and everything else Rian Johnson, we got into it last week.
I'll lean into the hatred there. Absolutely. I'm with you. See, I was mentioning before, but we didn't actually record it, but I've always got this dilemma, particularly as a writer, between the balance between farce and comedy. And although I've worked on a lot of farces, and I think Young Frankenstein is one of the great films of all time, farce is a difficult area because it doesn't bear correspondence to the ordinary physical world, which all films have to bear some correspondence with. Otherwise, we don't recognize it as representing our lives. So, yeah, I mean, it can be a drama. It can be a drama in space. But if you don't have those human empathic elements, ultimately the audience isn't going to care about it. The problem with farce is it's kind of like science fiction, is that these things are so extraordinary, these characters do, that we laugh at it because it bears a vague resemblance to our lives, but not a specific relationship. So ultimately, it can never be that resonant. It can cause us some small laughter, but not resonant. The problem I found with the first two films is that they had tongues so deeply in cheek that you never felt often that these characters were real. I mean, it's like a lot of the Agatha Christie you see on television. Like, it's just, you watch any Agatha Christie adaptation, and you're interested for like 6 minutes, because then the characters are just archetypes. I mean, literally, like, was the game Clue? Do you remember where, the butler did it in the with the candlestick? They're characters like that. It's a Hollywood problem, because there's all these books written about how story is significant. Aristotle, gave us this important insight into story. Everything's about story. Story is sacred. We mediate the world through story. Complete bollocks, or as we say in America, bullshit. That's not the way it works. Film is an experience of many things. It's a visceral experience. It's the visual, it's music, it's sound, it's editing, it's reordering of the world. But most importantly, it's a connection to character. We see in our characters bits of ourselves, and that empathic bridge is what alters our understanding of the world. It's not predicated on story. Story is one mechanism we use to get to audience. But you tell a story without compelling characters. If your characters are farcical or have no foundation in reality, and you can tell a really good story, but without characters that resonate with an audience, like the first two of these movies, you've got a story with nothing else, and it demonstrates, or objectively demonstrates, that story is not important, or not any more important than any other element in film. And what you said quite rightly about the beginning of this movie, when it starts getting into religion, you start thinking, oh, hold on. We're looking now at bigger, growing up issues that real sentient human beings are concerned with. So no longer are we in the realm of farce, but now we're talking about real people. And right away, the film began to resonate because these are real people. The only thing I would disagree about is that about religion. I think religion itself, the way it's practiced, is specious and banal and tragic and sometimes purgatory and all the rest of it that we can accuse religion of, quite rightly. But the desire for the metaphysical is something entirely different. So our individual desire for the world to be magical, that there can be the intervention of the divine or the semi-divine in our ordinary, tragic progressions towards death, is a natural human condition. We want something to be able to intervene, because the idea that the world is only physical is terrifying to us. That's the greatest religion out there. The biggest one with the most number of practitioners are conspiracy theorists. And conspiracy theorists are essentially religious, because they want to put a metaphysical manifestation, or something that is hidden from us, that gives the world meaning. If there is a star chamber, or there's a group of people who are controlling the world banks, or whatever it is, that gives order to the world. And it's not ostensible order, it's a secret order. And that is magical thinking. That's the basis of religion. So even without religiosity, people still want the metaphysical in their lives. And that's what this film goes to. Because what Benoit does, which is significant, is he's an empiricist. He's going to dissect the world and find a rational reason for everything. He's the Enlightenment in terms of philosophic historicalism. He is the rationalist, and he's saying there's a reason for everything. And of course, as we discover, without wanting to give the thing away, there is a reason for everything. But as we observe the film, before the reason is revealed to us, we as an audience are thinking, well, anything can happen in a movie. There could be a metaphysical reason for this. I mean, is this film going to be sci-fi, or is it going to be real? Are we going to have religious characters appearing, or are we going to have, like Lazarus, a resurrection? Or is there, as Benoit suggests, a rational reason for all things? So what's fascinating about the movie, although it seems just a popular bit of fluff, it is actually an examination of the rational mind and the rational mediation of the world and the religious metaphysical understanding of that. And what finished with quite interesting, without giving the game away,
you can give it away. Go ahead. It's a discussion, so they should have said, give it away.
Yeah, we're discussion, not a review. Go ahead.
There may be evidence, there may not be evidence, but it serves a function, because the world is tolerable while we see it as malleable. If we think we can change the course of events in our future, we can tolerate this intolerable experience of life. If we think instead that everything is exactly as it's physically presented, then ultimately our limitations are always going to be our limitations. And there's no escape from what may be a miserable life. You think about the people who are most religious, they're very often the people whose lives are the ones most lacking in hope. So if they can't find hope, they can't find any evidence of salvation, then they believe in the metaphysical, because that hope facilitates them and makes their world tolerable. So that's the argument.
You're talking about, you're talking about organized religion versus faith, which I get what you're saying there. I mean, the institution in of itself is a form of control for good and bad. But you're talking about someone's faith, yes, which Josh O'Connor's character does, right? He has faith in his fellow man. He has faith in Jesus Christ. He has faith in the world and the goodness of the world. Someone who's come from obviously a place of evil, where he obviously talks about how he killed somebody. And then you have him. So it makes, to Butler's point, Mike, to your point, and obviously Steven's point, when Benoit goes in there and has that speech, it's almost like you're setting your two pillars opposite of each other. And now this whole movie is to see, okay, whether or not there be a winner, but just what happens. And I think that they both, it's, one of the issues I have with the three films that, and because Benoit Blanc is such a interesting character. I really like Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, but he's never the lead in his own movie. It's always the people we're being introduced to. So it's very difficult for me to, like, I want more, but it's not his story. So it's very difficult to see this. Like, it's like this, having a great supporting actor in this film that's just overshadowing your lead. In this film, I don't think he overshadows too much. I think that Josh O'Connor does a really good job, and his character's really well written, and I think he's formidable. I think in the last movie, we talked about this, Mike and Steve. I know you were shaking your head before. Like, there's not a lot of people likable in Glass Onion, and also Glass Onion.
They're caricatures. This is the big problem with both the first two films. Is particularly the one in the first movie. It's caricature, and I'm not interested in caricature. I'm interested in witness. I'm willing to laugh, but I want to witness something that resembles something that I've experienced. We all experience our shared human condition. But when we see someone who's so arch and so contrived, we only recognize them from other movies or from literature, and we don't recognize them from our life. They have no resonance. That's why a director like Mike Leigh, for all the films that he's done, all with the foundation in improv and the complexities of the improvisational performance that he does, and all the nuance, and the characters very often go off in these tangential examinations of ideas that have nothing to do with the story. And you would think, right, that's bad writing, but it's great writing, because that's what we experience in the world. Not everyone stays on plot. No, not everyone stays with their single intention. And when we see characters who only give us information about plot or exposition, always serving the story, there's some subconscious, deep within our subconscious, we recognize this is a contrivance. And we see characters that have no nuance or complexity, like Benoit in the first two movies, we say this is a contrivance. And when we're saying this is a contrivance in our minds, it's making us withdraw from our engagement in the narrative. What's great about this film is Benoit suddenly seems a thinking person with philosophic ideas. And when he makes his pitch for rationalism, I get it. And particularly now, ever since post-pandemic, and the anti-rationalism has come out, that if I believe something, it can be true, and everyone's entitled to an opinion. Just because a doctor views something that has medical foundation and evidence, it doesn't mean it's right. That's just his opinion. Well, that's anti-rationalism. And now, so it's kind of like the 17th century again. We've got a battle between rationalism and metaphysics and having them on equal footing. That's what this film's about. And therefore, I think really fascinating. I think it loses its way, by the way, but I think it starts really well.
Well, to your point, and you know, well, actually, I want to go back to something you said before. The Star Chamber is a really good movie, but also I always think when we talk about the anti-rational, rational. Yeah, exactly. And the rational is that, you know, I always think of the George Costanza line in Seinfeld. It's not a lie if you believe it. So I always remember that line as well. Butler, we talk a lot about, I mean, the in this film, obviously it's faith and belief is a major theme. Is that the only theme in this movie that is that an, if it is that an issue with you, or is there other themes in this film that you kind of come out to you while you're watching this film?
Just because I'm not a fan of organized religion doesn't mean it's not interesting when it appears on screen. I think that's there, but I also think grace, which I don't think needs to be tied to religion. I think grace is a big theme. Benoit learns like grace through Josh. He doesn't have his big, you know, checkmate moment that he wants to do when he's on the pulpit and he's about to solve the crime. He lets everyone go, lets Glenn Close come back and admit what she's done and confess to Josh O'Connor's character. And Steve, you'll find out I'm terrible with names, so I can't remember anybody's name in these movies. But that I think grace is equally important and something Benoit learns. That's like his own personal thing. And to speak to what Steve said, like Benoit is a more human character. I disagree. I very much like Knives Out, but I definitely hate Glass Onion. But you don't get to know Benoit at all. He is kind of a character until this film, because this film is the first film he learns something in the end, that he actually, being a secondary character or not, he learns grace. And I think that's important.
That's hugely important because all films are about change, I think. So they're not always about story resolution, which people think they're about, but they're about changes in character. And he changes it. And the idea of grace or redemption, look, his process replicates the process of the Catholic Church. I mean, the Catholic Church is very, very complex. But the idea of confession before God is hugely important. He allows her to confess. Not that she finds an instant salvation, but it allows her to find some peace because she's aware of what her sins are. And that's hugely significant. The idea of individual culpability is very important in the Catholic Church. These are very complex notions for a film that the series of films that began in farce, and now the second one was very farcical, and now has come to this point. And I think that itself is really interesting. You went to other themes. The idea of different types of religion, because it was examining Orthodox religions where you have single orthodoxies. And in this case, it's represented by the older priest, the Monsignor, and his view. And then the idea of radical priests, the idea that of really the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism, or Martin Luther, and not to get too lost in the weeds here, but the idea that you can have an individual relationship with God, which is what Josh O'Connor, which is kind of a non-Catholic notion, can I say, but that's what he's conjecturing, that the important thing is our faith, is our redemption, our salvation, and how we get there doesn't ultimately matter. Whereas the Monsignor, which is like I can't remember which of the papal nuncios it was, but when they said that, we have to maintain the Catholic Church has always been, and there's only one way to the Godhead, is what he's conjecturing. So this idea between orthodoxy and individual articles of faith, I think, is one of the themes, absolutely. And then I think the other thing, it obviously gets into cultism, because all these characters are involved in this cult, and how self-serving that is, and how it's individually validating, and how cult thinking works. That ultimately it isn't about religiosity, it isn't about salvation, it isn't about individual redemption. It's about having a personhood as part of a group, and how that group then applies pressure to suggest a regimentation of behaviors. These are all very weighty and ideas for what is essentially a comedy or a comedy thriller. I think it's really interesting. It's also a subgenre of actor-heavy movies that started, I think, probably with The List of Aging Messenger in the 1960s, if you guys remember that film, where it takes a very small movie, a thriller, and then you have everybody from Frank Sinatra to Audrey Hepburn who are doing all these cameos in these different sorts of rubber masks. Really interesting. So it's a subgenre like Spot the Stars. And that's one of the joys of this film, is that there's so many famous actors popping up at every single second. It also subverts the movie, because the minute you recognize an actor doing a bit of shtick, you're thinking, okay, I don't believe this is the character. It's complex in movies because we have this temporal suspension of disbelief where we see a famous actor and we say, okay, it's Robert De Niro. We're going to believe that he's actually a mafia guy. But when you do it so often and so regularly, it gets to the point where you say, hey, I know that actor. I know that actor. I know she was in. And then it becomes like a game. And I think it distances you. Again, I compare this with Mike Leigh, where he's less known characters who will stumble, who will go off on tangential examinations of ideas, won't be focused on the individual story. And what happens is this vermicitude that we completely believe these characters are real and not actors doing a bit of stick. I think particularly with the first, we slightly disagree about the first of these Knives Out film. The first movie, I just kept thinking, okay, here comes another famous actor gonna do their bit. And he goes, hey, this is so much fun. I'm not being my usual
That's
self.
more that's very much Field's opinion of the first Knives Out. He was not a fan of those characters. You guys agree on that one?
Yeah, I know you were talking about before, Steve. I know you were talking about before about the characters and they go off on tangents but for like this type of film, for Knives Out, for maybe not Glass Onion, for this film, these murder mysteries, I know their character. We have a lot of great characters in here, but they're being pitched essentially as plot-based films. And so when they're making comment in the first film, they're obviously having commentary about Trump, and they're obviously doing a lot of stuff about the red hats. They're talking in code, but they're presenting these elitists, these wealthy people, and just how out of touch they are. And I just felt like that was getting ahead of the story that we were trying to be told. I felt like it wasn't helping, and it was kind of distracting me. And then in Glass Onion,
I kind of agree, but I slightly disagree as well, because I don't think it's a story. I'm the anti-story guy. I think
that's fine.
I think it subverts character. I think the only thing we care about is character. When we wake up in the morning, we go out into the world and we speak to someone on the phone, we're not thinking, what is their story? We're thinking, who is this person? When we go for a job interview and we're sitting across from someone, we don't think, when they start telling us an anecdote about growing up in Arkansas, or however they started their company, we're not really that interested. We're very interested in who this person is. When we're falling in love, they can tell us stories and anecdotes about their childhood. We're not really interested in the story. We're interested in who the person is. So I think we're all, it's the whole misbegotten principle of all these screenwriting books, that it's about story. So I agree with you that the first film fails, but I think the first film fails not because it gets ahead of story, but because it's only got story, and the characters are caricatures, and we don't see any human beings in that film. We see puppets who are acting out other actors we've seen in other movies before, but I can't think of anybody in that first film who resembles someone I know in real life. Let me ask you this.
I'm sorry. Let me ask you this: what's the what's your opinion about the difference between Father Judd in this film and Marta in Knives Out? Because they're essentially we meet them in the beginning, and there's definitely, because with Glass Onion, I don't want to take Glass Onion because we don't, that turn halfway through with Helen, right? Or I can't remember whoever her real name was.
Helen and Annie. I think were the two different ones. Yeah.
But so Marta and Judd are probably a better comparison. I'm curious, like, what's the difference there for you? Like, why one works and maybe one works better than the other?
I think that Martha, great actress though she is, again, it just seemed like something you might see on some worthy BBC adaptation of an Agatha Christie, which is, you just say, wow, this is a great bit of shtick this actor's doing. Do I, my constant measure, is there complexity here? Is there inconsistency? For a character to be believable, they have to behave like humans. Humans are inconsistent. They have more than a single note they play. She plays the same note throughout the film. Great actress, same note. No complexity, no inconsistency. Never, why not a moment where she smiles, where she's delightful and charming? No, because she has to play this kind of villainess. And where have we seen this villainess before? In our lives? well, maybe if we went to some, Jesuit boarding school, but I really don't think there's people like that in the world. It's taken from the paradigm is from film, not from life. Whereas the Father Judd character, much better and nuanced performance. He's ultimately charming, then aggressive, angry, then calm, revelatory, then secretive. That's the sort of complexity. As you look at the character, he does what I think every character has to do in a film. Because I think all films, comedies, action, and these type of films are all mysteries. And it's the mystery of character. We're presented with a complex character we can't figure out. And our desire is to come to an understanding of why that character behaves the way they do. We don't care about her, and we don't care about why she behaves. We just prefer she's shrewish. So we don't care how she behaves. Whereas Judd, if I'm talking about the right one, the Monsignor, he's so...
Father. Yeah. Monsignor is Father Judd. I'm talking about Josh O'Connor's character, but
okay,
Monsignor, Josh Brolin.
The Monsignor is with both of them, but the Monsignor is so complicated that we look at that and say, why is he behaving this way? And when an audience asks a question, they engage in narrative. And we want to know why he behaves so eccentrically. And therefore we examine his behavior, and therefore we examine the film text. Therefore we become engaged. That's good writing. The story, we don't give a damn about the story. Honestly, we don't care who did what to whom, I don't think. But we care very much about whether the good characters get rewarded and the bad characters get punished. That's more compelling. The rest of, if you, like Agatha Christie, if you tell me the details of 10 Little Indians, who does what to whom, nobody remembers. If you ask most people watch this film, who did what to whom in this film, they kind of vaguely get it. There's some crazy conspiracy, etc. But when you ask what's the most enjoyable part, I would say when the Monsignor is giving confession to the father, and he's talking about masturbating and things, those scenes are magic because we recognize the complex humanity of those scenes. We see the power dynamic going on. We're trying to figure out the behavior, and that's good filmmaking, good writing, and good characterization. As for Father Judd, same thing. This is someone who's in a crisis, and he can't really control his rage, which again goes to his humanness, and then his kindness, his desire to succeed, his jealousy, his pettiness, and then his transcendence. These things are in conflict. So now what are we asking? Which of them will triumph? So now we have a narrative, but it's not a narrative of story. It's a narrative based on character. How will this character decide what course they will follow? And that's compelling. That's why every screenwriting book ever written is misguided. That's why Save the Cat is a thing of evil. And you may hate organized religion. I hate organized screenwriting.
Butler, what other scenes jumped out to you? Because we've been through a couple different scenes here, so I'm curious. Like, and if you want to get into like a little bit of the visual too, we can kind of dive into that aspect of the movie as well.
Standout scenes. I mean, the confession at the end, the Benoit's speech at the middle. I do like the visuals of the film. One thing that I both love and didn't like was in the church, the light coming down when someone's off topic on religion or when goodness happens, the light comes back. And what I like about it is it's natural. That happens in life. Clouds go over the sun. Things get dark. It comes back. But it's used heavy-handedly in this to a point where I like it and I don't like it because it's so on the nose that part of me is like, oh, I like that touch, but it's maybe, I don't know if the contrast is just too much. It's too dark to too light. But if it was a little bit more subtle, I would love it. And now I'm on the fence of like, because of the look and how obvious, like hit me on the head with it is, I can't tell if I love it or I hate it. But no matter what, I found it interesting. And that happened, I think, in 3 different times in the film. Always, I think, in the church.
It was always in that stuff is in the church. Yeah.
I don't know what you. Yeah.
It's a
the
great
church director. Yeah. Both of those are very interesting.
It goes to the idea of how film works. Again, the idea that people think film always works from narrative. It doesn't. Film works. We have, I make a list when I'm directing of 12 different columns of discourse, of narrative. I have a visual narrative. Am I going to use close-ups or wide shot? Am I going to use high contrast, low contrast? Is it going to be backlight or front light? Is the camera going to move into a character's face at a key moment? That's not writing. If the camera pushes into a face at a key moment, the audience says, this is significant. What is there in the script that says it's significant? Nothing. The camera tells them it's significant. So what you're citing is, these objective correlatives is when you see a dramatic bit of light with probably a smoke machine, because you can't see light without smoke, and it picks up this beam of light, it's saying something metaphysical and significant is happening. What's great about what you're saying is here is a narrative that is not a written narrative, is not a story narrative, but a visual narrative, and film works by a visual narrative as well. I love also another term we borrow from semiology and the study of languages, because all parts of film are languages, different types of languages, is this idea of free-floating or disconnected signifiers. A signifier is something we see, and the signified is what represents it. So if we want to suggest the idea of a cow, and we see a picture of a cow, the picture is not the cow, but it represents the cow. So there's a subtle difference. So in a movie, we see representations of ideas all the time, which aren't the idea, it's the representation of it. In this particular film, it's the cross, the missing cross. That here's a church that is no longer, in a sense, consecrated because its symbol, its most significant, has been removed, has been desecrated. So this idea of, what is desecration and what is sacred is central to this. And the fact that the cross is missing and that Josh O'Connor wants to replace the cross, it could be cheap allegory, but it also goes to his own struggle with what he wants to see religion as and what it is. So that's a way of visually representing ideas, which I say to every young director, give up the idea of storytelling. You can use storytelling, sure, but that's just one tool that you're going to be using. A great filmmaker uses composition, camera movement, music, lighting, editing, all these things together of influencing and suggesting ideas to an audience beyond the more obvious elements of storytelling. And to your point, it is a beautifully photographed film. And it's constantly trying to use visuals and color and camera movement to suggest ideas, low angles, a lot of low angle stuff, looking at people with crosses and backgrounds, the idea of the weakness and the presence of God and all the rest of it. Having a lot of fun with devices used in more serious films and what is meant to be a lightweight movie. So it's kind of if Rian Johnson was a bit younger, I would say it's like seeing a young filmmaker who you saw his films at Sundance, I thought maybe he's got some promise, and he makes his first studio film, and you go, no, this is Paul Thomas Anderson, who made the best film of the year and One Battle After Another. But you do, obviously Rian Johnson is older, but you do sense this is kind of a maturation. He's actually making now a real movie as opposed to a movie with a wink and a nudge to the audience.
Did you both like the when they were doing the I guess it was the flashback sequence to the Monsignor's mother, and they were shooting through the stained glass, and I saw a video where they actually attached plastic, colored plastic red and dark blue, and they were fixing it over the lens so that when they were shooting all those scenes, it was like you were watching through the stained glass. Do you think that's too much? Do you think that fits? I mean, Steve, you probably be the better one to answer this. Can you go too far when you're trying to kind of nail a point home?
It's the same measure, and to what you were citing a moment ago, when it's a contrivance, it's subversive. So whatever film you do, even One Battle After Another, which I arguably is the best film of the year, when that film has its foundation in the most reality, it's the most effective. When you've got the pregnant woman shooting the machine gun, you go, funny, don't believe it. And suddenly it subverts itself. So whereas a film like Sorry Baby, which has such a profound foundation in the ordinary, we believe every single frame of that movie. So to your point, I do think there's, and I think you made a point a moment ago, there's a lot of bits of lighting or camera movement which are so gothic that it subverts the film. And I think there's a problem Rian Johnson has, kind of a whiplash treatment of his subject. I don't think he always knows whether he's making a farce, a comedy, a serious discourse on metaphysics, or a lightweight thriller with some mystery elements. And I think as filmmakers, we got to decide early on what our intention for the movie is. It can't be a series of pastiches and shtick that we get a reaction from in an audience, but ultimately doesn't have a sense of the whole. So what's great about the first half of this movie is it's actually a pretty good movie. It's actually about some important ideas, and it's got some really compelling and, from my measure, complex characters who are mysterious and I can't figure them out, and I want to figure them out. I want to know who Josh O'Connor is and why he's behaving that way. That compelled me. And then when it starts getting into the shtick, I'm thinking, oh, okay.
Well, what moment then? What moment did that kind of start turning for you? Because Mike, I want to ask you because I know you like the film. So when
they start solving the mystery, okay, then everything becomes about, oh, here's another clue, and here's another misdirect, and how did the killing happen in the chamber off? I honestly, I don't care how he died. I just didn't care. I mean, yes.
So you don't like, so the murder mystery angle of it, you don't want in. I know it's a murder mystery movie, but you don't want it in there.
Well, no, these are famous actors doing a bit of shtick. No one believes that it's actually a guy who's died. We all know it's just a bit of hijinks between a lot of very famous actors, and he's pretending to be dead. I don't think any of us for a moment felt the tragedy. And I ask you, at any moment, did you feel sorry for any of these characters? Like say, oh, of course, maybe the confession at the end. But prior to that, we're just sort of observing. We're not emotionally participating, except for the Josh O'Connor character, who's got this spiritual struggle going on. And we're thinking, wow, I feel for this guy. He's losing self-control. He's been charged with something he may be innocent of. I feel for him. But the rest, and as to the confession between two priests to the power play, that was interesting. But the minute the woman starts, doing the like for a Libra from Young Frankenstein, I was just waiting for the horse. Every time she said her name, I was waiting to hear the horse go. Whoa! I thought it was just a wee bit over the top. It doesn't mean there's not a lot of really strong and beautiful elements in this movie. But then the minute everything became about a clue and let's figure this out, it was like going to church and the church's narrative. And they believed that the audience was going to be engaged because they want the solution to the dilemma of who committed this crime. I got news for them. This is what we call in TV a hangout drama. The audience is much more interested in hanging out with these interesting characters than they are in the resolution of the mystery. They wanted to hang out with Monsignor. They wanted to hang out with the priest. They wanted to hear the funny repartee between these characters. That's the fun of the movie. The solving of the mystery. I ask you individually, did you really care who did it?
Go ahead, Mike.
With all due respect, I completely disagree with you there. I think this is a mystery movie, and I'm there to solve the murder. That's what I want to do. And I don't think this succeeds because I think you are right. And by the end of it, they're just like, and here's how it happened. And it's just like, how am I supposed to figure that out? But I want to figure out how I don't want to hang out with the Monsignor, which is an issue with a lot of the Knives Out films. Is other than Benoit, I hate everyone, which is not too dissimilar from real life. But like, I don't think these characters.
Even Josh O'Connor, you didn't find Josh O'Connor interesting?
I think he's a little puss half the time. I think he's angry the other half the time. And I think he's angry the other half of the time. I didn't buy his character. I thought he was so. I get angry and he punches a guy. I get angry and he punches a guy. He's got this anger in him, and he's got this anger in him. Never lets it out. He never lets it out. And yet I'm supposed to believe maybe he did. And yet I'm supposed to believe maybe he did murder this person. Maybe he did. At the end of it, I was waiting for it, and maybe it's because I didn't know, and maybe it's because I didn't know where Rian Johnson was going. I was expecting maybe a murder of Roger. I was expecting maybe a murder of Roger Ackroyd kind of situation with Agatha Christie, where it turns out Josh was the murderer the whole time. Where it turns out Josh was the murderer the whole time. I can't trust anyone. I don't like anybody. I don't like anybody. I just want to know how this dude died. The one failing of this movie, which I think is a lot of his movies, I am trying to solve these mysteries, and I'm not giving clues, and that's frustrating because I am there. In these movies and Benoit, I
love this, but it's weird to say you like the film, but you just said you didn't like any of the characters, and all you care about is the mystery. That doesn't sound like someone who loves the movie. God help.
I want Benoit. I like the mystery of it, but I don't want to hang out with these people. These are terrible people. To a point, it's like I'm okay not hanging out with you anymore. I'm okay not hanging out with people
to your family.
I understand, like it's like a little bit more. I would have liked more sympathetic characters. I would have liked more Samson. Because he's a character that maybe he did do it, but he's sympathetic. Whereas a lot of these characters in these, especially Glass Onion, which I can't talk about how much I did not like those characters of that film. They're not sympathetic characters that I can latch onto and appreciate. And I need, at least in a mystery in any movie, I need a character I like. And it can't always be Benoit because he's the observer. And although I do like that he solves, unless he's the lead, which which I also don't want. I don't want a Benoit Blanc movie where he's the main character. This is not James Bond. But I just want more characters that I can root for or be like, please don't be the killer. Please don't be the killer. Instead of just sociopaths who I'm just like, all right, one of these guys is going to be the killer. And clearly in 3 movies, Rian Johnson's not going to let me. He's not going to let me figure it out, which I find frustrating.
Yeah, he does. Johnson, all 3 films, including this one, he's trying to put a lot into all these movies. He's trying to say a lot with each character, whatever the overall theme is. Whether in Glass Onion, he's talking about disruptors and the wealthy, and in this film, he's talking about religion. I think he's trying to put a lot in these films, and I think that's kind of where we all have different issues with it. Various different issues, but I think that's why, just because we all each like certain aspects of the film and not these aspects. And to your point before, Steven, I think you were talking about how just like, you didn't say this, but I kind of reread this, that it's just simplify a little bit in terms of what you're trying to say here in this piece so that we can follow you through to the end where we're not kind of just kind of like, you know what I mean?
I really like what Carter said. I think that what he said about the characters not being sympathetic, I got a slightly different view in that you can't always be around. We'll see films about people you just like. I mean, but they got to have some human aspects. But we're basically saying the same thing. What I want to see human beings in a movie. And if I don't recognize human beings in a movie, I lose interest very, very quickly. So in that case, I think we share a perspective. And a lot of times, particularly in Glass Onion, I just said, yeah, there's a mystery here, but I don't believe any of these people. So it's like telling a campfire story about the man with the hook arm. No one really believes there's a guy with a hook arm where you hear the story and there's sort of some vague semblance of, oh, that was kind of scary. But if you say something like, there was a person here at camp last year who killed somebody, let me tell you about them, I think it brings it home a lot better than something that is obviously a mythology. And as for the idea of allegories, which he uses a lot of, and some things that are symbolic or talking culturally, and again, I don't ever buy that because, again, if something represents something, why not just address it directly? Why be oblique and say, hey, these guys are like people who support Donald Trump? Okay, then if you got an issue with Donald Trump, then make a film about Donald Trump and about, MAGA. But don't, put in like a joke with someone in a red hat. Why do it? It's just, that's what I mean about farce, is a series of small jokes that aren't about the human condition, aren't that interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen Sorry Baby, but it's a really very, very good movie. And there isn't a single frame for all the comedy in it where you don't believe this is a person. And they're very complex and you can't anticipate their behavior. You're trying to anticipate their behavior. So in a way, it becomes like a mystery, but a mystery based on real people. That, I think, is what we're all looking for, however we're disagreeing about these characters. And that's the problem, I think, with him. He's making these kind of gothic movies that are very old-fashioned in the style of, Agatha Christie and so on, but ultimately not as engaging as they should be. I mean, they seem disproportionate to their success. I don't quite get why they're so successful. They're amusing, but are they the best films of the year that demand that they get these huge box office? I don't get it, but I may be a minority, opinion. So obviously, I think.
Well, I mean, you got the hype machine going for a lot of these films. They got these films are just anything that comes out now these days. It's the best thing ever made. So you just have to kind of like wade through that hype. But also, this film is I know it came out in theaters, but for like a week. I mean, this is a streamer film, so like in terms of what I'm used to, and I'm sure what you're used to, and I know what Mike's used to. It's very difficult to judge a film's success when you're basing it on views or downloads or streams or like how many Netflix signed up, but you don't know. So it's very difficult. Like and this is like a different conversation, but it's just there's no way for us to level adjust anymore in terms of like what's a box office success anymore, because everything is just there and gone, straight down, a 30-day window gone. It's out of here. So this film, I would like to think this film would do well if it was in the theaters, but I don't know. I wouldn't be able to know that because we'll never know. And it's unfortunate that, I'm glad they got their bank and they got their money, but it's just unfortunate that you don't see a theatrical release so you can kind of like, this is the type of movie that you'd want to experience with an audience, just to kind of, you know what I mean? Like there's that visceral sense of like, just if I'm not liking something and the audience around me is feeling differently, maybe I should reevaluate what I'm watching here.
Did you guys see? Have you guys seen One Battle After Another yet? Either one of you?
Not yet. No,
Not
no.
yet.
I will be seeing that, but it's
that's
just,
a great example. What we're talking about is see it in a theater, because the chase sequence, which is the set piece in the middle of the film, is about as thrilling a set piece as has ever been photographed. And you sense in the theater everyone screaming on the edge of their seat, people turning to each other. You keep thinking the sequence is going to end, it keeps going on. That sense of the camaraderie of an audience is exactly what it's going to, and it's real, pure, filmmaking. With some really interesting characters, some very complex situations. Paul Thomas Anderson is a master filmmaker. So.
No, I like Pete. I like him, but like that 3-hour runtime is like you need to adjust your day around it.
I'm sure the theaters feel the same way. I know.
I'm not a young man anymore. I have to like navigate schedules to be like to see. It's tough.
It also kills box office. I mean, I remember when Bertolucci did Nuvia Cento, the film was 7 hours, so that's one screening. So every independent film would collapse if they showed it. So I get it.
Mike and I worked at a movie theater for many years, and we would always like films would come out and they're like, you got to get 5 showings. Like this film is 3 hours plus 20 minutes trailers. Do you want us here at 1 a.m.? No one's going to be here for a 1 a.m. show. And it's like, make a shorter film and you'll get more showings.
It's absolutely, essential. I think that's absolutely true. It's very hard getting films made right now because there isn't much theatrical run for them, as you say. Particularly now, as you guys probably heard, Netflix wants to buy Warner Brothers. Now that may seem innocuous and just one more corporation taking another corporation. For us out here, it's terrifying and stultifying because it means that now even more power is going to be concentrated with Netflix. Now, as you guys also probably know, what happened for independent filmmaking is there used to be a vibrant independent film industry. There still is in France, England, where there's independent cinemas. But the streamers said, hang on, we can just put the films on streaming. We have limited theatrical, if theatrical at all. What do we need it for? Our money is not made by the theaters. It's expensive to make a print. It's expensive to do print and advertising for the film. So it's better just to put it on streaming. Then the Writers Guild, of which I am a member, went on strike. The Directors Guild went on strike. The IA, which is the technicians, went on strike. All want money. The studios folded and said, okay, here's the money. And then they said, hold on. We've got this streaming model where we get these subscriptions and we're making these movies. We're getting less from subscriptions than we are from than it costs to make these movies. This is a failed model. Why did they do it? They wanted to monopolize the market. They monopolized it. They got every cinema to close. They took over the market and they weren't making money. So what's happening now? Switch on your television. You got to pay for everything now. And the other thing they've done, they stopped making movies. So they concentrated all the resources around streaming. They stopped making movies. And right now, I think the Writers Guild, I don't know what the unemployment is. I think it's around 90% unemployed. The IA, about 70% unemployment. The Directors Guild, mostly unemployed. They've killed the industry. Now, if Netflix takes over Warner's, which makes feature films, and everything becomes streaming, it's going to be even more stultifying and even less going to be. So then when we come to films like this, or like the other films we discussed, whether we like them or not, every decision is going to be a very simple commercial one. Is this an entirely commercial film that with the lowest common denominator will attract the biggest audience? All niche programming will kind of disappear. All independent film will disappear, and we'll be making a lot fewer films and probably of a lower quality, certainly less risk-taking. So it's kind of terrifying. So what we're talking about here goes beyond just this individual movie, but really the whole existential issue surrounding the film industry right now.
Yeah, Field and I, as soon as the news broke, we were recording that night. I texted Field. I was like, "So, are we going to do a bit where we have a funeral for cinema before we record?" Because it's that news is kind of like that. It's not going to be filmmaking anymore. What it's going to be is content, and that's all they care about. Streamers and all these platforms. It's just content. Story doesn't matter. Content. I want content. Doesn't matter story, characters, everything we're talking about. Lighting. I don't care. Light them like I'm lit right now. This is content. We're just talking about movies. I'm lit perfectly well. I don't want interesting stuff. Just put it. I want people to be able to repost it on their phone right tomorrow. And that's what it's all going to be.
Yeah, they already talked to me about IP. I say, when you say IP, do you mean my script that I just gave you? But they're more interested in IP. They want to find different ways of exploiting it. And now you guys, I'm sure, are aware about this vertical phenomena. Vertical cinema. And I was thinking I've been in the industry 50 years. I've worked on 100 movies, the biggest films of all time. I know cinema. There's no way vertical is going to happen. And what's happening with all the studios? they're setting up vertical divisions. And if you've seen, and I'm shameless. People can hate me for this. Vertical shit. I've seen it. I've seen them all. They're terrible.
No, it's really bad melodramas. Yeah.
I don't want any part of it because these are little melodramas with no characters, no narrative, no nothing. And they resemble movies, but they're not movies. But they're cheap to make. Yep.
And they're designed to get you to sign up for whatever it is, $5.99 to watch the whole 40 clips of a minute long clip. I'll say it. It's garbage. All right. So we'll talk. So I think we've tangented a little bit, but that's fine. I guess, we've talked a lot about wake up. I keep saying wake me up, wake up, dead man.
But I can't get it. Did you guys like the movie or did you not like the movie? Because you say you liked it, but then you told me all the things you didn't like.
I like the movie.
We like to nitpick.
That's what we do. We nitpick it. Nothing is perfect. Everything has flaws, except for my favorite movies. They don't have but yeah, we always nitpick. I did like this film. I thought I think I would rather watch Knives Out because it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more consumable. But I think this movie is a far better film of the three movies. This is probably the best. Well, Glass Onion's terrible, so that's not hard. This is the best Benoit Blanc mystery that they've done.
I completely agree, and I think we all agree. The Onion one is the worst because it's a broad farce with characters we don't care about, and even a story we don't care about.
Yeah.
In fact, if I was to quiz you right now about the story. What was it about and what was the resolution? I don't remember. You probably do.
Glass Onion?
We only watched it last week.
Yeah,
we only watched it. If it was like last year, I'd be like, I don't remember. Some rich guy. And what I really liked about this one was, even though I know the priest, Josh O'Connor's character, was rewriting the first half of the story, kind of reiterating it to Blanc.
Voiceover.
Yeah, well, yeah, voiceover. But we didn't have that moment where we flash into a whole nother story all of a sudden. We didn't have that. But also now we're subverting that. And I was glad because if they did that 3 times in a row, I would have rolled my eyes. So I'm glad we didn't have that moment.
Yeah.
But
I'm not a huge fan of voice.
They've made a lot of money from these movies. So this is sometimes the thing about Hollywood is they reward people for aberrant behavior. And like Barbie's another great example. I dare I say it, I'm not sure if Barbie was the greatest film of all time. I was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I'm not sure it was the greatest. My friend wrote it, so I don't want to offend him. And I
But it was awesome.
It was. I don't want to offend Noah, and I don't want to offend Greta, but it's not the greatest film of all time, but it was a phenomenon. So I'll give it its due. It was well crafted and it was well written, but it got more attention than maybe it was due. But because it was phenomenon, do you know how many spin-offs or kind of parallel stories based on toys that are coming out in the next year? Just you wait.
Yeah.
And so they learn the wrong lessons. I mean, think about Noah Baumbach because he's a great writer. So when you got Noah and you got Greta writing the script, they're writing about really important things, and they took a commonplace toy and they made it significant. So I'm not criticizing them; I adore them. But the spin-offs or the things that are trying to imitate the idea, they're learning the wrong lessons. That film, if it was good, and it was good, it wasn't good because it was about a toy. It was good because they elevated to write about a lot of bigger ideas and about complex characters. But the lessons the studios are taking away are, toy movies will make a lot of money. So my worry about
that studios have been doing that for decades.
Yeah, you're right.
That's the model. Yeah.
And now I think with these films, I think we're going to get a lot of old-fashioned kind of mysteries of saying, we're going to give you a mystery and you have to solve it. Go to the cinema to see it. Okay. But I think it could have been, the first two could have been so much more because the third one demonstrates that when he gets into something more resonant and substantive, the film becomes more interesting.
Yeah. So if you, when the inevitable fourth film comes out, do you want it to be basically Wake Up Dead Man again? Or do you want to see him, because as much as I hate Glass Onion, it is kind of its own little different thing. Do you want to see him go into a different kind of subgenre, or do you want to kind of him to stick with that serious kind of gothic crime tone? What would you prefer?
I think you guys have, it's perfectly reasonable because we represent the two parts of the different spectrum of the film industry. I'm interested in story, but I don't think the story should be primary because I think you can have very stories that work perfectly well and are classically structured. And McKee would think that you did a great job. and the film be entirely uninteresting. Whereas when you have really interesting characters and not a really interesting story, the film can work because the characters are so very, very interesting and compelling, aka Mike Lee, aka Terry Malick, and things like Tree of Life. And most of Terry Malick's films don't have strong story, but really interesting, compelling characters, and even Paul Thomas Anderson. So what I'd like is to take the resonance and complexities of these characters, like Josh and Josh O'Connor and the other characters, and then develop them even more, and then build the mystery out of that. I think if they take us on a ride and we really are interested in the characters and we can't figure them out, and we want to know, if we can't figure the character out, we can't figure their motivation out, so we don't know who does the crime. I think that's going to be ultimately more interesting than something that just goes through the motions. And I think that's why this film comes closer to success and why Glass Onion fails so miserably. And I got the famous actor thing. I get, we want to see famous actors acting famously, but again, it just takes us kind of out of the film and thinking, oh, okay, he's doing his shtick. Doesn't mean it's not entertaining. It's just not as substantive as the film might be. And I think it could be so much more than it is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we've taken way too much of your time now because we're at
not taking too much of your time. Sorry, I'm going off on all these different.
No, not at all. Not at all. We love talking movies. Please, we could go on and on and on. Thank you so much for joining us on this Now Showing. I think this was really cool. I really appreciated the dialogue, and it's always good to get Butler challenged on his views. So that's good. I always like to see that.
We liked and disliked the film for similar reasons. We just expressed.
Of course. Listen, there's no.
We share a view. Yeah.
Yeah. What we say in the show, there's no right and wrong. It's the discussion that's the win. We just want to talk about movies and film and story and everything that goes along with that. So this is what it was. So thank you so much. I know I said if you have anything else, you get everything else you want to let everybody know about.
I've got a novel out, which is about a lot of these ideas, to the articles of faith and comedy called GRQ, which is done exceptionally well on Amazon and elsewhere. It's where the bookstores everywhere and all sorts of platforms, and it's a bunch of literary awards, and it's got a 85% perfect score on Amazon. So it's and Gail Ann Hurd, who produces The Walking Dead and produced Aliens and produced Terminator, has got a blurb on the front where she says one of the best books she's read, and so on. So it's kind of a high recommendation for a producer of her caliber. You mentioned the podcast, which we're very proud of, with Vince Grimes, who's the former creative director of Google. And we talk about films and ideas, kind of what we three have talked about tonight. There's an Instagram page called Steven Bernstein Director Writer, where I do little pastiches about filmmaking and film theory and screenwriting and all the different instructions we examine. And then I've got a new book out, which comes out next week, called The Book of 10, which is just like a manual for filmmakers. And that's all the things that I'm doing. And of course, my movie GRQ, my new movie, comes out next year. So no one's going to remember all that, but at least they'll say, "Oh, Steve Bernstein."
We'll know.
The movie.
We'll remember.
You'll tell them. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, Mike.
Some producer from Knives Out who's going to ask me to direct the fourth one, and now I lost the gig. So yeah, thank you.
You can blame us. It's okay, you can blame us.
No, not at all. They liked your ideas. They liked what you were talking about. They're interested.
We'll reform it, and they'll phone me right away and hire me. And then I'll thank you. I'll bring you onto the set. Thank you, guys.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah. That'd be awesome.
Paula, give us our spiel. Go ahead. Do our thing.
If you're interested in our show, you can join us at ForgottenCinemaPodcast.com, where we have links to all our episodes. We have over 300 episodes where we talk about films just like this. Usually we talk about forgotten films that seem to be forgotten by audiences, whether it be because a more popular movie was released at the same time or the film simply didn't catch on with an audience in its initial run. That is every Wednesday. This Wednesday, we've got our, Reindeer Games episode coming out for Christmas. So check that out and see what we thought of that film. And we've got our Now Showings. We got our lead up. If you didn't check out our lead ups for Knives Out and Glass Onion, go check those out. We're doing the Scream series leading up to Scream 7. We've got RIP or The Rip or whatever the hell it's called coming out next month as well. If you want to support us, go on Patreon. We've got merch store discounts, exclusive look back episodes, all that kind of good stuff.
Awesome. All right. Excellent. That's it.
300 episodes. I'm very impressed. How long have you been doing it for?
2019. We did it for 2019. and I took a year off because I wanted to stop doing it. But then Mike was basically like, "No, we're doing it again." So then I was like, "All right, fine." So
that
we started.
You guys
I dragged him back.
I don't know anybody who's on 300 episodes. You guys are substantive. Well done.
Thank you. All right, yeah. So thank you again, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Everyone else, I'm Mike Field.
I'm Mike Butler.
And this is Forgotten Cinema, now showing. Take care.